So Ensayos are a international group that were one of the initiators of the Venice Agreement. And the Venice Agreement is this coming together of the local communities from across the world. You can see in the image that's being shared right now, all the little dots representing the different hubs of people involved in this agreement. And this was like really a new thing that hasn't happened before, that these local groups are now coming together in this way and came to this agreement, this shared kind of document that recognizes the care that is shared by a lot of people throughout the world. And so my name is Frankie. I go by she, her pronouns, and Swantje is also hosting the session.
Hi.
And we decided to connect the Venice Agreement. We were both lucky enough to actually take part in the Venice Agreement in Venice. And we wanted to, this process of creating the Venice Agreement was something very special and very unique, this kind of opportunity, and we were very inspired by it, and we wanted to bring that into Peat-Fest, especially the way that the Venice Agreement kind of approached the process of gathering information and gathering voices and coming out with the final output. So that's the reason why we decided to do the final session of Peat-Fest, where we connect it to the Venice Agreement, because we also see that Peat-Fest is also this coming together of local groups and grassroots initiatives. So somehow it feels like a continuation of the Venice Agreement. We also thought it was a nice opportunity to invite people that were part of this agreement to come and share their thoughts and share like their learnings, because it happened a few months ago. So it was kind of a nice moment to kind of think back and reflect, like what actually happened there and what did we learn and what are we taking forward and maybe leaving behind. So basically how the session is going to work is Camila is going to host the first part of the session and kind of talk through what the Venice Agreement was and kind of the process, and maybe we hear from some people, if some Venice Agreement participants could make it, how they saw the Venice Agreement and how they've now implemented that in their work. And you can ask some questions and kind of get to know this this process. And then the second part of the session will be about applying the learnings of the Venice Agreement to Peat-Fest directly. And part of this process is that we've been creating these shared notes throughout the whole 6 days. Everyone's added so many thoughts into the Jamboard. It's been really nice. And we need to make sense of these notes, right? So right now they're like really kind of brain dump, lots of different quotes and ideas and things. And like you can see in this diagram, the one half is kind of like this brain dump idea that everyone just writes everything and you just record all these ideas and thoughts. And then the second part is about making it into something that's like digestible and understandable and can be taken up in a way. So that's kind of what we wanted to do with Peat-Fest, is that we have all these ideas and all these people and this kind of diverse collection of thoughts, but somehow we need to make sense of them and know how to like take these learnings forward into the next thing that we do.
I might just interrupt. So maybe like we'll just start with Camila giving us the introduction and then explain our process in the second part, because I don't want to steal Camila's time. And so we just dive into the Venice Agreement now and go into the combination with Peat-Fest in half an hour or like 45 minutes.
Perfect. I'll get started. Thank you. Thank you to both of you and everybody who's here. I agree with Frankie in that it's a continuum. The Venice Agreement, Peat-Fest, RE-PEAT, the work that Ensayos does, the work that the Greifswald-Meyer Center does, the Global Peatland Initiative. It's a relay. We're all passing the baton quickly, slowly, more institutionally, more informally, as we try and coordinate all our efforts to protect, care, and become more learned in what peatlands are, where they lay, how we can be at their service. And I'm really happy to see that Jan Peters looks like has come into the room, and so I invite Jan also to pop in at whatever time, because the Greifswald-Meyer Center was a real important institutional partner also in the process of the Venice Agreement. And I want to bring all of these layers up because, as Frankie was saying, and what will go into the second part of this session, it's about figuring out how these different voices with different volumes can become one concerted poetic voice, which is what you're seeing here in the Venice Agreement. And so I was really excited by this invitation because it meant that I could go back into my photographs and sort of remember what that process was like. And I'm going to go, I'm going to rewind. So go from, I just showed you what the Venice Agreement looked like once it was signed by all of the people who you see here. We are really excited. We didn't think we were going to manage in 2 days. Most people in this image didn't know each other beforehand. Some flew from far, some are locals to Venice, and we spent 2 days in different formations, concentric circles, playfully listening to each other's versions and trials and tribulations of working on peatland conservation issues. So I'm going to take a little bit of distance from that core group of people who signed the agreement, and you see most of them here, and go to the tail end of Tierra del Fuego, which this is just a little snapshot from the Venice Agreement where you see a bunch of nodes. So the Venice Agreement was not only participated in or signed by the people you saw in the picture, who were there in full body to use their hands to sign this agreement, but we also had input from the virtual realm, collectives that were on the ground that got a little kit from the organizers to also send in their questions to some of the core answers that those of us who were there in person got to work on in a kind of deeper and more embodied way. And why I flew us all the way down to the tip of South America, there nearly touching Antarctica, as you can see on this map, is because this is where the idea for the Venice Agreement was born. So very far from Venice, and I'll get to the answer to the question why Venice very soon. But it was in 2021 that the first ever binational seminar occurred, binational between Argentina and Chile. So Tierra del Fuego, that archipelago there at the southernmost tip on the other side of the Strait of Magellan, is a place where there are just the high integrity peatlands that are at the heart of what spurred this agreement forward. And it was at that seminar that steam just started to gather, a real sense that we could put aside the differences between Chile and Argentina and come together to join our strategies, our experiences, and work in favor of sort of a one peatland system. There had been other meetings and attempts to do this, and that's what you see in 2011. Of course, those dates are added to a long history of different efforts around the world of people meeting to try and come up with best practices, standards for peatland conservation, consortiums, alliances. So this isn't something new, and the Greifswald-Meyer Center, the Global Peatland Initiative, RE-PEAT. You all are from very many different countries, sort of close by, doing the work of birthing a sort of a one language, even when there are language differences. And the Venice Agreement wanted to be another really important date on that long calendar. And we, of course, chose June 2nd because it's International or Global Peatland Day, and decided that this group of, and they're named here, the Wildlife Conservation Society, Ensayos, that I direct, the Greifswald-Meyer Center, would join forces with a local in Venice to create an event in which that steam that I mentioned that was being gathered in Tierra del Fuego could come down from being a gas and become a solid, and it could provide a platform for this new type of a document, a poetic one that's animated by art and artists, and that includes a groundedness in local initiatives. So that was really the premise, how to find initiatives around the world that are grassroots. They may have larger institutions working on global policies that they collaborate with, that they get funding for, but we're really going to try with the Venice Agreement, this is our thinking, to honor the everyday work of people doing peatland protection, peatland management. So we just, we decided to save a date for a process in which this storm of an idea could slowly start to become a reality. And meet before some of us met in Venice. Maybe there are some people in the audience who attended this pre-agreement brainstorm, which already involved everybody who was invited to Venice. And I'll mention that the way that the invitations came about were through, again, I'm just going to go back here, through a putting together of a list by all of the organizations that are mentioned there at the bottom, who we were already collaborating with each other. And everybody just started to say, I know this group, okay, where are they? How do we get funding for them? Can they come? And I wanted to show the faces of these women because they're not here with me today, because three of them, Nicole, Antonieta, and Barbara, are Chilean. They're in Chile right now. They're voting for a new constitution. So power to them, but they are really behind this, at least the organizational efforts to have things like the save the date, the pre-agreement brainstorm happen. And this all was going on virtually. We were in separate countries, working on this, working with the Greifswald-Meyer, and we started to develop and use Miro, as you will a little bit later on in the session, to gather our thoughts, to gather our needs, to create budgets, to create text, to create press releases, to understand what the agenda would be when we met in Venice. And for those of you who need a little bit more of why Venice, this is where I'm going to go now, so that you understand how this document called the Venice Agreement came about in a really sensual and aesthetic way. What you're looking at here is an installation that is right now on exhibition inside the Chilean pavilion at the Venice Biennale. The Venice Biennale, for those of you who don't know, is an art exhibition that happens every 2 years. It's been going on for more than 50 years, so it's 100 plus years old. And the exhibition has a central hall where there's one selected curator who invites artists, and then it has a series of smaller pavilions that are organized nationally. And for the Chilean pavilion, I applied with a project in which I invited these 4 artists, Carla Maquiavelo, Ariel Bustamante, Dominga Sotomayor, and Alfredo Tierman, to be part of a process that predated the Venice Biennale and which is titled Xolxoltol. And Xolxoltol is a Xelknam word. Xelknam is the language of the indigenous peoples of Tierra del Fuego, that archipelago that we just saw on the map. And Gemani Molina, who's the poet that gifted us the words Xolxoltol, which mean heart of peatland, is sitting right there in the center of that picture, right next to Barbara Saavedra, the director of the Wildlife Conservation Society, and me. The 3 of us are here at the opening of the Venice Biennale, talking about how an indigenous leader, a scientist, and a curator have for years been trying to advance in environmental education, awareness, ecocultural ethics together in a process that we call Ensayos. Ensayos are trials or rehearsals, attempts at overcoming, again, difference or divides between our disciplines, between our languages, between our funding systems, and to coordinate the love that we have for peatlands so that we can provide more avenues for peatland conservation that feel like they speak to us across the board and that aren't being devised from the top down in just political realms, but that are being thought through aesthetically through indigenous cosmologies, and then also through on-the-ground science programs. So how to bring this to Venice? So I invited those 4 artists, but those 4 artists are at the core of a ring of different artists who have already, like I said, before the Venice Biennale, been working on peatland issues. And here you see the designer of the Venice Agreement. You'll see her again, the graphic designer, Rosario Ureta, and she is there in our pavilion at Venice, hand drawing a wall text where we begin to explain to the audiences what peatlands are. It was part of the artistic vision that to do that, people who may not know what peatlands are should be able to touch them, smell them, be in a space that that provoked maybe memories for some people who had been on peatlands but didn't even know what they were. And this is where the Greifswald-Meyer Center comes in as a really important creative partner. What you see here, I love this picture. It is sphagnum moss from Germany being driven in by a boat on the canals of Venice, right next to those gondolas. And these boxes of sphagnum moss arrive here in Venice. It's March of this year, early March. And in the picture is the artist Christy Gast and the artist Nicolas Arce, who are what the creatives of the Sphagnum Lab. Christy does a residency at the Greifswald-Meyer Center, where she and a number of scientists and volunteers harvest these peat mosses and bring them to Venice as part of this conservation device that is this exhibition that is in the Chilean Pavilion, and that gives space or provides a platform for the Venice Agreement. So for months on end, during install, these mosses were handled by this group who was slowly weeding them and beginning to understand them and all their materiality to create experimental conditions for them to be placed within the pavilion. These conditions were also devised or worked with the experts at the Greifswald-Meyer Center, and very slowly, the moss starts to land in its right now semi-permanent home. New people start to come in, volunteers, and to the left, those of you who saw Fernanda Olivares speak on the first days of the Peatland Festival, she is the daughter of Gemani Molina, so she's also a Shaknam woman, and she was there as not just as an advocate of her community, but also as part of the Sphagnum Lab team, where she, along with the artists and a large production team, was able to create this artwork that brought together film, sound, science, in a series of experiments, including this screen, which is made of a biomaterial. So a process through which we were trying to generate more of a commitment to peatland conservation all across the process, and figuring out what sort of lighting diet the mosses were going to need to live indoors for 8 months, what sort of water filtering systems, what data we could collect from the growth of these mosses. And this is what they look like now. They're doing incredibly well. They are producing peat love for the hundreds, thousands of visitors to the pavilion on a daily basis, and this will be running until the end of November. Who you see here is one of the facilitators of the Venice Agreement. So Charula now is for the first time in Venice discovering this installation, understanding that the Venice Agreement is going to be in service of that. And here you see her again. This is the first day of the Venice Agreement, right? So the Venice Agreement, again, just to recap, is a collateral event born from this installation in Venice, and that wants to harness all of that energy around peatlands being put into an art world venue and to extend it out to this this process of agreeing, using technologies that we have at hand. And so here is Chado and Nicole Pouchel from WCS, beginning to explain what it's going to be like, what this Venice Agreement is. And here we are, first day, everybody being introduced to the work ahead, to each other. The venue that we're in is called Ocean Space. It's run by an art institution, TBA 21 Academy. They are dedicated to ocean health, and they partnered up with us because of water, wetlands, and the importance of understanding again that peatlands, be they in Tierra del Fuego, in Indonesia, or in Ireland, are part of one global atmosphere, all supporting the well-being of waters and the people that depend on them. And so began the process of the Venice Agreement. But if we go to the day before this, I thought it would be interesting, because this is what I want to do, is just put out here for all of you who have been part of Peat-Fest and who will hopefully become part of the processes of the Venice Agreement, because it's a living, open-ended document, and I'll get to that. Just how important it is to understand the many dynamics that go into agreeing and creating frameworks for ourselves to better our practices, with understanding of practices around the world dedicated to peatland conservation at different scales, right? So some of you probably recognize people in these pictures, and already you know what scales I'm talking about. You know, high academics who have been writing about peatlands for years, like Hans Houston, RE-PEAT doing on the ground community youth work, and you know, artists there. Laura Harrington is there, who has been for 10 years working with peatlands, and there are some people who from the world of sciences from Lithuania, and all of them are arriving to an event that was devised and designed by this group of people. So this is the day before everybody arrived. It's an evening. There's Barbara Saavedra, Nicole Puchel, Charo Lanao. And what we're doing is looking at the minute-to-minute schedule of the 2 days we're going to spend together, that we really just need to make juicy and effective as well. Knowing that we're going to hit roadblocks. It's going to be sometimes hard to understand it ourselves, and not just because we're speaking different languages, or that we're using English as a first language, but that's not everybody's language, but that we're going to be wanting to arrive at words that represent all of us and that synthesize such a complex reality as peatland conservation. And so here's what we do is we divide up in groups and decide that there are going to be monitors or group leaders, mentors for the different issues that we're going to be discussing over the 2 days. Charo here is talking to this one group, giving them tools, exercises, and possibility of consulting with her when they find that there is an issue that becomes sticky, or that there's a confusion about what it is that we need to work towards. So there's Jan Peters and Suzanne Abel from the Greifswald-Meyer Center, and Carla Machiavello and Denise Milstein from Ensayos are there. And then on the other side, there's an editorial team. And that's what you're seeing in this picture, right? So there is a mediator, or a dynamizer, she calls herself, Manuela, who you see in this picture, who's going to be doing what Charo Lanao is doing for the working groups. Manuela does for the editorial committee. So basically, we decide that all of the experience and energy that we're going to put into devising a document in 2 days that we can circulate around the world to discuss peatlands from a bottom-up approach needs to have a space, I'm going to call it right now outside and inside, because that's sort of how it worked in the building. Here we are in this building of the ocean space. You've already seen some indoor pictures. Mostly we worked outside for 2 days, doing exercises like the one you see here, where people's backs are to each other, their eyes are closed, they're being guided to think about language, peatlands, and I'm not going to go into describing the details of each exercise, but they range from playful to thoughtful to playful again. This one was a secret sharing kind of telephone line exercise, all of them being made available so that we could, again, sort of find quick, easy ways to not get stuck on what words mean for us in certain contexts, which is so often the case when we feel like we are needing to make our opinion heard, especially if we are from groups where we feel our opinions aren't heard, right? And that's sort of true for all of us who work in peatland issues. And so sometimes we get stuck on our concepts, or we think that they're the right way to go ahead. And these games were used to kind of loosen up those categories in the hopes that really new informal language would appear, language that carried the love that joins us, and not so much the divides and differences across our continental divides, because of course some of us doing peatland work are doing it in continents that are wealthy and that have more democratic structures, others less democratic structures where there isn't so much being done on the front of conservation. And all of this was leading to the production of texts, like you see here in papers, where questions were being posed in the different groups. These groups were designed by those of us who were organizing. We knew exactly who was who needed to be sitting with who, because of how distant they were from each other. So it was a real joy to see people learning from, say, Houston Cypress, who's there kicking back, laughing, a Miccosukee two-spirit poet who is from the Everglades, where there are some tropical peatlands, and is deep in work of decolonizing, sitting right next to Diana Kapansky from the Global Peatland Initiative, and from and right next to her, Matti Aiko, a Sami artist from northern Finland. So very different experiences coming together, and all of those texts were then being given to the editorial team. So I want to say now we're inside in this one room where the editorial team was just processing all of this text, reading it carefully, understanding where the new was emerging from this strange assemblage of people that we had gathered in Venice. It was really wonderful to have Hans Houston there, who has worked on so many of these documents from across the history of peatland conservation. And so he was very thoroughly reading things and noticing where it seemed like a new spirit or concept was being born. Right next to him in that little picture is Michelle Lobo, and she's a lawyer who is new to peatlands, but has had experience in developing other types of documents, human rights documents or gender equality treaties. So knew a little bit sort of what certain formalities, at least minimal formalities, the text was going to have so that it could be read in spaces that maybe require more of that legal speak. But everybody, again, was, really supporting the idea that this document was going to be of a different order. It wasn't going to fall into, say, wasn't trying to be the Paris Agreement, nor was it just going to be sort of some wild out there artist manifesto, but that we were trying to arrive at something that was unique to peatlands. And then in the picture where you see Fernanda again, and Manuela and Rosario, they are taking what Hans and Michelle, and I was part of that group too, of reading what was coming in and processing it quickly and bringing it to the level of design. But already that was happening in the groups here, who knew that they needed to produce texts that were synthetic and already sort of pre-digested, so that we could achieve all of this in 2 days. And again, for that, it was really important to work with creative technologies, drawings and language exercises, taking lots of breaks to bring things back to the body, to the sensorial, and then sending that back in to the editorial committee, who eventually started to develop this, that we began with. So I'm arriving sort of at the end of what I wanted to put out there for questions, and hopefully to lead into the work of closing this this year's Peat-Fest, and that the Venice Agreement is so proud to be part of, kind of as the cherry on top of all of the work, because what this hopes to show is that everything that we do in different formations adds and becomes traces on a global map of attention, of energy. And as you see in this map here in this picture, there are lots of places where there aren't dots. And that doesn't mean that there aren't people there working on peatland conservation, or that aren't living on peatlands or dealing with the effects of climate change on peatlands, or mining on peatlands. So what the Venice Agreement wants for the future is that it be appropriated by others, and that we create a continuum again, or at least the possibility of meeting, maybe just like the biennial in Venice, not necessarily in Venice, but in other places every 2 years, to revise this document, to make it a living document where the categories of what we value and what we need for peatland protection accommodate an ever-growing community. And that again includes formal organizations and informal ones, so the Venice Agreement belongs to everybody that has signed it. And that's what was so inspiring about Frankie and Swantje saying, we're going to do a session about the Venice Agreement. Great, it's yours, do it. Use it for what it is and make it more. I don't know, depending on how many people are here that were part of the Venice Agreement, I just maybe, or just to close out my talking, want to say 2 more things about where where the Venice Agreement, or what the next stages of the Venice Agreement that are sort of at hand, and that is to meet once again virtually those people that were in Venice, and to just review once again this document. And we're going to put it to print, and then it's going to be sent as an actual printed poster, which is how it was designed. And we did an exercise at the very end, imagining where everybody wanted this poster to be hung. And so some people said, at my local butcher shop, or at the bus stop, or in the office of a local authority, or at my grandmother's house. And so the idea is that once everybody who signed the agreement gets their copy, they have a couple of weeks to actually make that dream come true. And we're going to do a little photo competition. This was one of RE-PEAT's ideas, and I thank them for that boundless creativity. And then from there, to have the agreement, start to pop up and appear. But we need to also begin to think of how the agreement design-wise is going to start to gather more dots, gather more voices, and even things like, and this is what I wanted to end on, and even this central poetic text that came from the voices of everybody who was there, who was generating new language, tickling, ticking, alive, murmuring, sensitive, sensual language, so that we can talk about peatlands as living entities, which is so much of what has been happening in this Peat-Fest, the rights of peatlands. And we had a moment at the very end of the agreement where we were all really excited about it, where there was a word that had crept into our conversations, where we were really trying to make it so that the amounts of carbon that peatlands stores is a kind of is both their potential but also the biggest threat to peatlands and the world. And there was a moment in which the word bomb was being thrown around, and to talk about a carbon bomb underground. And that was a very sensitive word and topic, especially in Northern or Eastern Europe, but also of course other places that are war torn. And so there was a need to very quickly change out that word and understand that word maybe had some poetic potential, but that its poetic potential actually played against the pain that it created for some people who just did not want to sign something that said that peatlands were bombs. And that discussion for me was groundbreaking. It left me so humbly thinking about the power of words, to create change, and the power of words to also produce pain and reinforce oppression, or models of models of oppression and discord. So it ended up being replaced for the word engines sort of quickly. And I'm still sitting with it. I'm not sure that that's the right word. Does that mechanize peatlands if we use the word engines? I've personally been thinking that carbon sinks might be a better word, because it, at least in my artistic poetic mind, it draws me to think of their shape and how they contain but also filter water. So maybe that's something that I, as one of the Venice Agreement signers, would bring up in a post-agreement meeting. And I just wanted to share that as a kind of as almost a vulnerable story to end on that note. We are all vulnerable and strong together. And that's what the Venice Agreement wants to be. It wants to be an avenue for our strength to really consolidate, but that strength is based on that we catch each other in our vulnerabilities and allow ourselves to be fragile and even weak at times when it comes to the path of protecting and understanding peatlands, because it's hard out there, but we've got each other's back. And that's where I would like to end for now, but I'm open to questions or just having Frankie and Swantje lead.
Yeah, thank you a lot, Camila, for taking us all back to Venice and on the journey somehow how the Venice Agreement evolved. It was really fascinating to now see the behind the scenes, and also thank you very much for explaining this process, because that's actually where we want to now start our second half of the session. So since we got very inspired by the method of the Venice Agreement, we were thinking as RE-PEAT we can do a similar thing. We also had a lot of input, a lot of great sessions the last days, and collected some notes. We will explain you how exactly after the break. And we now want to do a little experiment with you in rearranging and maybe like summarizing these notes and creating also an outcome of Peat-Fest in a way, as the Venice Agreement was an outcome of these 2 days of thinking about a new agreement of peatlands. And therefore we need you all, and we need you for this experiment. And if you're able to join also another half an hour, maybe you can just write your email address in the chat, because then we will just add you to the mirror board. And then after you've written your email address, you can maybe like stop Zoom for a second and stretch and I don't know, have some water, and then come back after the break and go on this little workshop with us. That would be great. We will be very happy to try out if we can apply our learnings now together with you.